Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming here to London today for this briefing, and thank you to those of you joining us online. A little bit of housekeeping first. So there's no planned fire alarm today, so if there is a fire alarm, to evacuate the building, we need to go through the main door and gather in front of the county hall, which is just next door. Toilets are downstairs through the back door. So today, a group of experts will guide you through the scope of the competition and through the application process. Namely, we have here Karen Speak from Innovate UK, Chris Rowe from Innovate UK, Laura Thomas and Julie Brown, again from Innovate UK, and myself from the Knowledge Transfer Network. Oops. So the agenda, after my brief introduction, Karen will guide you through Innovate UK and opportunities in precision medicine. Chris Rowe will then explain you the scope of the competition, and Laura and Julie will guide you through the application process and all the how do I do things. We will then have a break, and we will gather here back for SME panel discussion in which they will present us do's and don'ts in the application route and in the way to apply for funding, to apply for Innovate UK funding. Just very briefly, I will introduce you to the aim of today, which is to review the scoping guidance. There will be plenty of occasion to ask questions, and as well as to network and start creating opportunities to collaborate and apply for Innovate UK grant. Just to clarify, the webcast will end at lunchtime after the Q&A and panel discussion with the SMEs. In the afternoon, there will be 4 groups that will discuss specific themes that Chris will explain us in a moment. So just very briefly, a quick overview of KTN. I'm Giulia Boselli, Precision Medicine Knowledge Transfer Manager. And in a nutshell, KTN will coordinate and drive the community to deliver solution for specific challenge, and we do that helping SMEs to find expertise, markets, and route to finance. We are Innovate UK networking partner, so we have experts in every business sector covered by Innovate UK, and every expert can help you in specific business sector as well as throughout and across sectors. Coming to KTN and getting in touch with us means being exposed to all the opportunities that are out there for you in any given sector. And we will help you in your path from the idea through to the market. How it works, we organize briefing event like the one today. You can have tailored advice and insights. You can get help again across sector, and we can introduce you to partner across academia, research organization, business, as well as governmental stakeholders. So we have great teams that can offer you support, that can offer you business support, and can help you accessing different kind of funding, both private and public. as well as European funding. And we have a design team that can help you design and prepare your innovation for the need of the market. We do have a lot of activities and projects. We have special interest groups, as well as different kind of events that are tailored and that change continuously to meet the need, the growing, changing need of the market. We do create value, so we have more than 6,000 members in our network, so there are plenty of opportunities to grow your business through the help that KTN can provide. So I will be here the whole day, so come and introduce yourself, meet me, and I will be happy to help. So now I will leave the floor to Karen to Innovate UK and the opportunities in precision medicine.
Okay, good morning all. Welcome to the briefing event for Shaping the Future of Precision Medicine competition. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview really of Innovate UK and particularly precision medicine and all the various activities that we have going on. So it's a very exciting time for precision medicine, as you've probably gathered. And the time is now really to get involved in this whole area. Within Innovate UK, we're very much building infrastructure and opportunities around precision medicine within the UK to really drive business-led innovation forward in the UK. So you made your way here, so you must know a little bit about Innovate UK, I'm guessing. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of background to why we exist and the kind of work we're involved in and the kind of support that we can offer, particularly to SMEs in the UK. The sort of key area here that we're addressing as Innovate UK is this problem that we have in the UK. We're fantastic scientists, we're fantastic inventors, we come up with all these fantastic ideas, and I think that's reflected here in our publication record, which we're there with the big boys there. We're in the top 5 in terms of peer-reviewed publications. This was last year from Nature, data from Nature. But however, when we look at actual patents that have been approved over the years, we fall pretty far behind. If we look at Japan as an example, so we've actually in the last year produced more peer-reviewed publications than Japan, yet they're really storming ahead with patents, over 1 million patents in that time, compared to our 140k. So obviously there's a gap there with how we actually commercialise opportunities in the UK, and how do we tap into this goldmine? We need to think about the future of the UK economy. We need to drive forward, and we need to build our own knowledge-based economy. So this is basically how Innovate UK was set up to support these activities. And what we are a non-departmental public body, and we're the prime channel through which the government incentivises innovation in business. And the focus is on commercial opportunities, developing commercial opportunities, getting these products into the market, getting these products onto the NHS. And our overall aim is to keep the UK globally competitive, to make the best use of our knowledge that we have in the UK. I love this slide. Last year we had our 10-year anniversary, and that was a really good opportunity to look at the kind of impact we've had over 10 years. And we've invested over that time 2.2 billion, which actually now has been really ramped up. This last year, we're now spending over 1 billion. We're offering 1 billion to support innovation in the UK, which is a significant ramp up. But over the 10 years, 2.2 billion has leveraged additional industry funding, matched funding, and about 1.5 billion additional matched funding. And what I'm really proud of is that through these investments, we've actually created around 70,000 jobs in the UK. And for every pound that we've actually invested in the business-led innovation, we've brought back £7.30 into the UK economy. So this is through this increase in the job opportunities, as well as increase in revenues for these companies that we're supporting. When you think about this, a lot of this is very disruptive projects, disruptive novel technologies. Quite often these are pre-revenue. I think this is something to be proud of. Okay, so precision medicine is a key priority theme for Innovate UK, which is why we're all here. So the way we define, I can't read this on here, it's a bit tricky. The way that we define precision medicine, Innovate UK, is enabling early and accurate diagnosis to inform patient management or selection of therapy. So it's around using technology to offer that key decision making for patients in the clinic. So you can see here how precision and discovery medicine in particular fit to our other key areas that are of interest. And this is very much part of our bioeconomy, sort of our focus on life sciences, really. So I do firmly believe in the UK we're in a unique position to lead precision medicine. We have some amazing opportunities, amazing expertise. We have all the whole genome projects. We can lead the world in this. We need to take advantage of all these opportunities and make sure we can capitalise on that. So over the 10 years as well, we had a look at our investments to date in precision medicine. And here we've had a rough look at the portfolio and worked out where which areas we're investing in. So over the 10 years, we've spent over £85 million. And here you can see a split with the therapeutic areas. I think this is a reflection of the maturity of each of these areas in terms of the technologies available at the time. It's no kind of strategic focus on a particular therapeutic area. But obviously, we're looking at technologies across the different therapeutic areas. So we're all about fund and connect for UK SMEs in particular, working in partnership with Knowledge Transfer Network, and you've heard from Julia around how they offer some of these connect services. So we have the competitions, similar to what we have today, but we also have new models of funding opportunities, and these are co-funding. We have co-funding with private investors, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and tell you what we're doing there, as well as co-funding with charities, and these are kind of recent initiatives that we've been working on. Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, which is obviously a lot of our work recently, is in delivering the industrial strategy, and I will talk a little bit about that and particularly how precision medicine fits into the industrial strategy. And then workshop and networking, we look at areas where we can support businesses, where we may be able to support business-to-business opportunities, or to actually build value propositions, for example, for adoption into the NHS. And I think some of you might have been to our workshop that we held in Leeds a couple of months back, but essentially this is just one example of how we can support these businesses to think about their value propositions early on when they're developing their product. This was essentially a room full of different stakeholders from NHS, from different companies, having a discussion on what is a value proposition, what does it look like, how do we do them. And we had in the back of the room a group of artists, so they were just extracting very key take-home messages. What is the elevator pitch for your technology? I think that's important when you're driving any of this kind of work. You need to think about that very simple message on your value proposition. It also gave us some fun, sort of putting together these animations, etc. So, Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is sort of a government initiative to really push forward the commercialisation of opportunities in innovation in the UK. And this represents a fund of 4.7 billion across R&D, but the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, the piece that we're delivering under UK Research and Innovation, is 1.7 billion over the 4 years. And what we've been given is sort of 4 key grand challenges that we're addressing through building diverse sector expertise to address these key societal challenges. And these are the AI and data economy, ageing society, clean growth, and future of mobility. But these don't kind of quite fit so separately. So underpinning the clean growth age of society and mobility is the artificial intelligence and data economy. So the core area of expertise there that enables a lot of these technologies to develop. So these are underpinned by the sort of data and artificial intelligence. So under ageing society, we have, you'll see the word precision medicine there, data to early diagnosis and precision medicine. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So this is a programme consisting of 3 different work streams, and the challenge really is to combine the wealth of data that we have available with real-world evidence and make this data available to companies, to industry, to SMEs, to develop their products and services. So the 3 main streams, we have our genomics, where we're working with industry to fully sequence the 500,000 participants of the UK Biobank. So you can imagine these subjects of the UK Biobank, you have approximately 10 years of data on their health, very detailed phenotypic information, all their kind of medical information, plus, we will have the whole genome. So this is very powerful in identifying the biomarkers and linking that into the early diagnosis piece. We're developing digital innovation hubs. This will be driven by Health Data Research UK and NHS Digital. So this is really about how we manage all this data and how we make the data available to businesses, for example, to really develop these products. And digital pathology. So this is around actually extracting the data from your general pathology slides and radiology and imaging, and actually using artificial intelligence, machine learning, to analyse these images and slides. And over time, obviously, a computer will start picking out details on those images that we might not pick up on the human eye. So we're improving our capability there to actually diagnose diseases earlier. So we have these big initiatives building infrastructure for precision medicine, whereby a lot of our sort of projects that we're involved in here can really tap into this infrastructure. So this is just some examples of companies that we've supported, particularly the digital pathology area. So these are really progressing and getting out there now in the clinic. We have Perspectum Diagnostics here today, so you'll hear more about that later on, so that would be quite exciting to hear about that. And really what this all comes together really as a sort of vision around how we can develop precision medicine infrastructure and expertise in this country. So we have all these emerging technology capabilities. We have very cheap fast and robust whole genome sequencing available to us. We have the emergence of enough digital power, informatics power, to really use AI and machine learning. And we have game-changing diagnostics, and building those together and managing the data appropriately, including these with things like medical records and the digital images, we can really build up a whole picture of the individual patient. I've put data twin here just to kind of imagine that we can have a whole picture in terms of data of an individual. Next time you go to a clinic with a symptom, next time you have a test done, that could feed into this information that we have on the individual patient and identify trends in person's health, for example, pick up diseases early. This is kind of how we can imagine where we might go with all this opportunity. And therefore, we through this kind of building up this information on the individual patient, we're looking to improve NHS efficiency and obviously patient outcome and quality of life. And the digital pathology, radiology and AI is part of the ISCF. So this is, just to give an example, this is up to 50 million of funding for around 5 or 6 centres of excellence in the UK. So this will be going active shortly. And this is very much a collaborative industry, academia and NHS consortia. So we're kicking this off right now. And I mentioned the evolving funding models. So we are partnering with private investors now. We ran a pilot investment accelerator, we call them. We've ran a pilot competition last year, and these were the partners just listed on here that were involved in that pilot. And this is really bringing together funding from the private sector with government grant and offering 100% funding to the successful projects. This captured the media's attention and was in the Times. You might have seen that. And we've just closed the part of this competition for investor partners last week. So the next phase will be for SMEs. And this is all about investing in opportunities to improve the way that we accurately diagnose, monitor and treat disease, simultaneous grant and private funding, projects up to 24 duration and between half a million and 1.5 million. For SMEs, this will open on the 23rd of July. So it's just to give you an idea of the sort of opportunities, the wider opportunities that we have at Innovate and the different flavours of competition and different areas that we can support. And the scope, this is for the investment accelerator, is very much on the next generation. What is the next technology, the next disruptive technology that's really going to make a difference? Next generation diagnostics, tailor-made therapies, beyond like your CAR-Ts, and what is the next thing beyond this? And breakthrough point of cares. There's some amazing technologies out there in terms some of the graphene tattoos and the inks that change colour according to blood glucose levels, that kind of thing. There's some amazing novel technologies that can be game changers here. And artificial intelligence, we're looking for game-changing artificial intelligence sort of SMEs really who can potentially link up ultimately with the sort of infrastructure that we're building. And this just gives a summary of the competitions that might be of interest to people in this room. So we have innovation loans, which might be for more advanced programs that are nearer to commercialisation, where you just need that bit of cash to build your manufacturing or that kind of thing. We have international programs as well. This is one example of UK-China antimicrobial resistance program, which is running at the moment. That's 10 million for UK business, and deadline for 6th of June for that. We have the biomedical catalyst, which is open and closed all year round. It's an ongoing program, so there's one open at the moment. And the shaping of the future, which you're here today to hear more about from Chris. The investment accelerator, as I mentioned, will be open in July, so that one's coming up quite shortly too. So that's all I wanted to say, just to give you a sort of background picture on Innovate UK and the various activities. So you can see there's a lot going on. We're very, very busy with it all and very excited to be able to deliver this as well. So I'll pass you over to Chris Rowe now to talk about this competition, the shaping the future, the scope, etc. So there you go.
Thank you. Right, hopefully you can hear me. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming along. Some familiar faces here and some new ones as well, which is always good. So this is essentially going to involve me reading out what you should have already read in the scope. So I'm very tempted to see if anybody wants to volunteer to go through them. Has anybody learnt them? No? Oh dear. Okay, so, the scope. So, I can't see it, and it's not very well done here. I can't actually read on here. Okay, so we're looking at £5 million pot. It's very similar essentially to the previous round, competition round one, apart from £5 million. And again, we're looking at essentially precision medicine, things looking at how, as Karen mentioned, looking about patient treatment selection. Essentially, that's our key thing. So we're looking at patient selection, not looking at the treatment side of things. So the dates there, obviously, we've already opened on the 14th of May. As you can see, we're actually at the briefing event, so that's fair enough. It closes on the 11th of July. We haven't put the word noon in big letters. That's not because it doesn't apply, it's just we forgot to do it. So it is noon. Please remember that if it's 1 minute past noon or 1 second past noon, you're out, I'm afraid. So please, that does happen. So please be very aware of that. And the applicants will be notified around the beginning of September. So as I say, this is a £5 million pot, and it's pretty traditional. So we have the feasibility section, and the collaborative R&D. So feasibility, it's all about trying to understand the sort of the potential of the concept. So it's kind of what I consider doing your homework properly. So what the real demand is there, some early technical work, value propositions, and I'll list some of the aspects in a second. But it's really about trying to understand, is this worth pursuing? That's the idea. And then the R&D is looking at the sort of the bigger projects. So for feasibility, we're looking at up to 12 months, up to £100,000. That's, again, pretty standard fare. I guess the only difference is we don't have the word SME. You may appreciate in the past we've become a little bit SME focused on everything. Again, we've taken that out. So again, this can be large companies as well. So any companies, any UK-based companies can apply for feasibility either on their own or as a joint effort. Yeah, that's probably the biggest difference from what we tend to do. Collaborative R&D is 24 months up to £2 million. Again, this can be, you need 2 grant-claiming organisations and must be led by a UK business as well, or RTO of any size. So the main difference from that is it's not just SME focused, but in terms of 2 years or 1 year, £100,000 for 1 year feasibility, or up to £2 million for 2 year. Collaborative R&D, that's pretty standard there, I think. So again, to go through what we consider by feasibility, so again, it's performing some sort of initial technical activities. It can be looking at the value proposition of the concept, and this is something I'm personally very keen on. I say we ran a workshop on value propositions. It's what's your real elevator pitch? Why is somebody actually going to buy this? We believe this is actually where most companies tend to fall down, is they get very technology focused, think, isn't this marvellous? Go to the NHS, and the NHS goes, so what? So please, there is money there, and one of the things at the workshop is, well, there's no money to do this. Yes, there is. Please use it. It's a very valuable thing. It's something that companies don't tend to necessarily spend their valuable time and resources on. It's perhaps not seen as a priority. But I can tell you from our perspective, having seen hundreds of projects, this is a big issue. And again, we fund a lot of stuff. They go to the NHS, you get to say what issue. It's a bit of a waste of time for everybody. So please think about that. The money is there. It's a very important issue. Also to work with relevant organisations to understand the operational, clinical, regulatory requirements. Again, it's all about sort of trying to do your homework properly in that sort of sense. Again, looking at the health technology assessment, we do fund clinical trials. The quality of them isn't always very good. And it's because they perhaps don't understand the question they're trying to answer as well. So again, it's a very important issue. I think it's worth companies spending a bit of time trying to understand these issues properly, getting some help doing it, and it will pay off in the long run. So please think about that as well. And again, looking at the progress you've already made and that sort of thing. So feasibility, up to £100,000, 1 year, it is very important. We do urge companies to do that, and companies do complain that there isn't money for doing this sort of work. Yes, there is. Collaborative R&D. So these are the bigger projects. So we've got 4 themes that we're looking for this time. So for the feasibility, I should point out, so it's anything that meets our definition of precision medicine, so all about patient selection. So as long as you meet that criteria, you can apply for the feasibility area. For collaborative R&D, we've narrowed it down a bit to these 4 areas. So we're looking at rapid and accurate diagnosis of commonly misdiagnosed ailments. So this is about cost-effective therapies already on the market. We found out, that this is a bit of an issue with misdiagnosis, so it's something we think we need to tackle, and it's very important to the NHS. It's a priority for them, and I think there's a clear value proposition behind that as well, so it's an important issue. Looking at mental health and precision psychiatry, paediatric and maternal fetal medicine, and also looking at inflammatory diseases, so psoriasis, respiratory, autoimmune, Crohn's, and transplant rejection. So those are the 4 themes you need to fit into one of those if you want to apply for collaborative R&D funding. And just to make it a little bit more difficult for you, we also have some sort of our grand challenge areas. So we are looking for the next wave of diagnostics. Again, this is a common theme to us. We are looking for the next great big disruptive thing, not same old, potentially. So we're looking at products and services which will predict adverse drug response in the clinic, and also establishing precision medicine clinical trials. And again, clinical trials is an important area for us, so you need to fit into one of those areas as well to fit in. And again, we need to show clear understanding of market potential, route to market. So all the sort of things you would look at in the sort of feasibility section, we'd like to see, if you're not applying for feasibility, we'd like to see that you kind of tick that box off. So please put those sort of information in, why you think the market is, why you think you've got a clear value proposition. If you don't have one of those, please consider whether you need to go back to the feasibility section and answer those issues. And again, out of scope, so this is, again, pretty standard. So things which don't meet our definition of precision medicine. So for feasibility, as long as you meet that definition, it's all about patient treatment selection, you can apply for that. For the collaborative R&D stuff, we've also got those 4 main areas and the sort of 3 grand challenges you need to fit into. We don't do drug discovery or biomarker discovery. That's much earlier stage. That's very much sort of research council territory. So you've got to have a pretty clear idea what it is you're looking at. And we don't do for treatments that are still in development unless it's part of a sort of companion diagnostic thing. So we want things, once it's on the market, there's a treatment option available as well. So that's very important to us as well. And I say, unless it's a companion diagnostic and you can justify that. So that's it from me. So I'm happy to take some quick Q&As on sort of general things. If you've got a specific question about whether your particular idea fits into the scope, we can have a chat afterwards. Do we have a microphone anywhere? Because obviously people, you can hear here, but people on the webcam can't always hear. So there's a question, I think there's a question there first, I think. Should we do?
Okay.
Oh, okay, well.
Good morning, my name is Victor Higgs from Applied Nanodetectors. We're doing work on asthma management and diagnosis. On the collaborative R&D, could you go through a little bit more about the TRL levels for those 2 applications?
Essentially, you need to have a clear idea what your biomarkers or anything are. So you can't just say we don't accept fishing trips. We want to find a biomarker for this. You need to come with some clear biomarkers in mind. We've done some initial research. We've narrowed it down to these. We think these are goers. That's what we're really after. So TRL 3, 4, that sort of level, really.
Sorry, for the collaborative R&D, is that the same?
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. But again, it's got to fit into those focus areas as well. So that will streamline it to some degree. So I think there's one question over there.
Hi, it's Darren Batt here from MyDNA. Thank you, Karen, and yourself for helping us dive into this. A couple of questions, if I may.
Yep.
I think they're both fairly brief. One of the questions is on your slides where you showed 4 potential areas
Yes.
in terms of therapy where bids should be made. Is it right that we should only address one area? What if there's an overlap generally between one or more areas within that 4?
That's fine. You don't get extra points for it, but that's fine.
No,
so yeah, as long as you meet one of those, if you meet 2, 3, 4, if you can do all 4, I'll be amazed how you can do that. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as long as you meet 1 or more, that's fine.
Good. That's easy. And hello, Karen. It's for you really, because in your slide you mentioned the 500 million whole genome sequencing data, which was available collaboratively for research. Is that still being built, or is that going to become available?
Yeah, so
for example, if people wanted to do a clinical trial?
Yeah, that's not available yet. So that's something we're building as part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. It's 500,000. It's the UK Biobank samples.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, not 500,000. Yeah, so that is being built, but may be available, or part of it may be available?
It's all being developed at the moment, so you'll hear more about that in the near future, hopefully. So,
that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks both.
You can access Biobank now. You just make an application, you can access the data now.
Yeah, there's
I'm just about to say exactly the same thing. So I work at the Medicines Discovery Catapult. We have a theme which I run, which is access to data. And so a lot of people come along and say, where can I find linked clinical and genetic data? So we will help you do that. At the moment, UK Biobank only has array data. It doesn't have whole genome data, which is why it's being effectively expanded in this way. There's no chance that will be ready for this competition. So if you want whole genome linked data, your best bet is probably Genomics England or maybe one of the other initiatives that are around. But I can help you with that.
One question in the front.
Hi, good morning. Karen Schmidt at Predict Immune. I'm curious when it comes to the R&D projects and the 3 areas that you have to match.
Yes.
The first one being diagnosis. I guess that seems to read as to exclude prognostic biomarkers. Is that the right interpretation?
I mean, it's about patient selection, treatment selection, so that wouldn't rule out prognostic stuff, if you can make a convincing argument, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Have I amazed you, surprised? So if there's, we're going to be around all day, so if there's any specific questions about your particular thing, we will try and give you some help. Again, if you do have further questions going on about sort of scope areas, please contact customer support. They will send it to me. It's better to do it via them, because if I don't answer, they will give me a kick up the backside. So please do that, and there's a record, and they're much better at doing that. So if there are any of those sort of questions, please do that. Okay, so I think we've now got Laura, is it, to go through the questions? Okay.
Okay, so my name is Laura Thomas, and I'm Portfolio Manager at Innovate UK, and I'm joined by my colleague Julie, who's going to talk to you a little bit later about the finances section. So this is the agenda for today. So I'm going to talk you through the eligibility criteria for this competition, the application process on our innovation funding service, which includes the project details and the application questions. Julie will then take you through the finances, the funding rules, the assessment and selection process, what happens if you're successful, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay, so in terms of the eligibility criteria for this competition, for the feasibility studies stream, you can be a single or collaborative. For the industrial or experimental development, you must be collaborative. The lead must be a business of any size or an RTO for both streams. You must carry out your project in the UK, and the start date is no later than the 1st of November. In terms of the project costs, so up to £100,000 for the feasibility and up to £2 million for industrial research or experimental development. The project length, so up to 12 months for feasibility and up to 24 months for the other stream. The application form I'll take you through in a second. That's 10 mark questions. And the appendices are slightly different for this competition, so it's for question 2, question 4 and question 9. And if there are any universities within your project, they must submit a JES output document that shows a with council status. Okay, so these are the types of organisations that Innovate UK fund. So we have businesses, and this is small, micro, medium or large. We also have research organisations, so that includes universities, non-profit distributing research and technology organisations, public sector research establishments or research council institutes. And then we also have public sector organisations and charities doing research. Okay, so the aim of our state aid scheme is to optimise the level of funding to business and recognise the importance of research base to the projects. Please remember that at least 50% of the total eligible project costs must be incurred by a business. So this means if you have an academic in your consortium, the maximum level of project costs is 50%. And if there is more than one in the consortium, then they would share the 50% between them. Okay, so what is collaboration? So in all collaborative projects, there must be at least 2 organisations that are claiming grants, a business or an RTO-led consortium, which may involve both business and the research base, and you must provide evidence of an effective collaboration. So if you want to make more than one application or resubmit a project from a previous round, any one business may be involved in up to 3 applications in this competition, but can only be the lead partner in one application. And any one research and technology organisation may only be the lead partner in one application, but there must be 2 other UK businesses and at least 1 UK SME claiming grant. If they're leading an application, they can be involved in up to 3 applications in this competition. And if an RTO is not the lead on any application, they can be a partner in any number of applications. Okay, so Chris went through these, but these are some key dates again for you. So the competition opened on the 14th of May. The briefing event is obviously what you're receiving today. The submission deadline is the 11th of July, and as Chris said, this is a hard deadline at 12 noon. So we do ask that you get your application in good time and contact us before the deadline if you have any issues, because if you contact us afterwards, we can't do anything about it. And then we'll aim to inform you on the 7th of September of the outcome. Okay, I'll talk to you briefly about the application process. So hopefully most of you will be familiar with our innovation funding service. It's been going for about a year now, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about that and how to apply. So this slide shows that our users are from all over the world, and IFS helps to collaborate with the project partners wherever they are. So this map shows the location of IFS users for the period of July 2017 to May 2018. And as you would expect, the majority are in the UK, and the next largest number is in the US, followed by China, India, Colombia, and Germany. Okay, so you'd search for a funding competition, and when you click apply on the competition webpage, you'll be directed here. You can then use the keyword search to find the competition that you're interested in, click the title, and then it will open the competition for you. You can then click on the competition to see a tabbed view of the eligibility criteria, the scope, the key dates, and more information on how to apply. And when you're happy that you want to apply into the competition, you click Start New Application. The lead applicant will need to create an account if you haven't done so already. You can simply sign in if you've already got an account. You can then use Companies House Lookup to search for your organisation to save typing in the name and address. But if you're not on Companies House, you can manually enter this information. We advise that research organisations and academics manually enter their information so that you're not listed as a business on IFS to ensure that you receive the correct funding. Once you've logged in, you'll get this view. From here, you can set up your consortium and your team members, and you can invite your colleagues and collaborators to help you with your application by assigning questions to them. The application overview allows you to see details such as the competition title, the application deadline, the progress bar, and grant terms and conditions. You can then invite participants by entering their name and email address. IFS will then invite them via email to create an account and join your application. Any collaborative partners will be responsible for entering their own project costs. When completing your application, you can assign questions to other people in your organisation or a partner organisation to complete or edit the answer for you. They can then assign the question to someone else for their additional input or mark as complete. There are some key features of IFS in that you can spell check and format your answers, and you're able to view your word count limit, and importantly, able to see the online guidance when answering any questions. Okay, here you can see the application form layout, so that's split into 3 sections. And these are the project details, so these are unmarked, but key for the assessors to set the scene. The application questions, which are obviously marked, and then your finances. Okay, and I'm briefly going to go through these now. So, project details. This includes the application details. Please make sure that your research category is correct, as this is used to calculate your grant value, so obviously very important. The project summary, so this highlights the need or challenge, approach and innovation, and the outcomes. And this is really key to setting the scene for the assessors, as it gives them an overview of your vision. We then have the public description, so this will be published if your project is successful, and please be aware of confidentiality here. And then scope. So it's obviously important that your project is within scope to receive funding. Please use this field to justify how your project fits the scope for the assessors. If you're unsure as to whether or not your application is in scope for this competition, we ask that you do contact customer support in good time. Okay, and this is the layout of the application form. So as I said, 10 questions, and then you've got appendices for question 2, question 4, and question 9. So I'm not going to go through these in too much detail, but I'll just read the question out for you. I think Chris is going to go through these later on in the session. So question 1 is around the need or challenge. What healthcare challenges will the proposed project address, and what are the problems with the current approaches? Question 2 is the proposed solution. So what is the proposed solution, and what will be the focus of the project? Question 3 is around the route to market and the value proposition. So how will the final product or service be brought to market, and what will encourage healthcare providers or individuals to adopt it? Question 4 is the project plan. So here you'll need to tell us what is the project plan, including the work packages, key project milestones and deliverables. Question 5 is around the market. So what markets you'll be targeting in the project, these can be domestic and or international, and what are the other potential markets. Question 6 is around the team and the project management. So tell us who is in the project team, what their roles are, and how you'll manage the project effectively. Question 7 is around intellectual property and the freedom to operate. So how are issues around the intellectual property being managed within your project? Question 8 is impact and additionality. So what impact might this project have outside the project team? You need to describe the impact that an injection of public funding would have on this project. Question 9 is the risks. So what are the main risks for this project and how will they be monitored and acted on? And then question 10 is cost and value for money. So how will the project cost and how does it represent value for money for the team and for the taxpayer? So as I said, just a brief overview there, but Chris will go through these in more detail later. Okay, now I'll hand over to Julie, who's going to talk you through the application finances.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Laura. That is. Excuse me while I just figure out how to work this. Okay, so looking at the finances, there are 3 sections to complete. Each organisation is responsible for putting their own finances in, and each section must be completed before each partner can mark as complete. The sections will vary whether you're a business or an academic, and the academic page will look slightly different than this. So the sections you need to complete are project costs, your organisation, and your funding. So we'll now go through these very quickly. Okay, so any organisation not completing a JES form will need to complete their project costs using this form. There are 7 eligible cost categories that each organisation needs to complete. We will now go through each of these in detail. IFRS works on the basis that you enter your detailed costs and the values will be calculated by the service. Project cost guidance is available online, so I would ask you to familiarise yourself with that before you start doing your application form. Okay, labour costs. So we're going to go through each of those areas really, really quickly. So here you just need to enter the role, the annual salary, the number of staff, and the days to be spent on the project. It will then automatically calculate the total costs. If you have multiple people in the same role on the same average salary, enter this in the role within project field. Okay, please note that dividends, bonuses and non-productive time cannot be included within your labour costs as they are ineligible. And when making grant claims against labour costs, actual costs claimed must be supported with timesheets. Okay. Overheads. We have direct and indirect, that's the 2 definitions that we use as a result of the project. So these can include additional costs for administrative staff, general IT, rent and utilities. You can select from the 3 options, so you've either got no overheads, 20% where it will calculate automatically for you, you don't have to do anything else, or if you want to calculate it yourself, you just press that button and off you go. Okay, I'm whizzing through these. By the way, everything will be online after today. You'll be able to go into the competition on the date page and you can have the webinar and the slides will all be available so you can look at this at your leisure because I'm going through this rather fast. Material costs. Here you need to enter and describe what materials you're going to use on the project, the volume and the cost, and make sure the materials are directly used in the project. Residual value has to be removed when entering costs, and we expect costs to be entirely project specific. Okay, capital equipment usage. Here you'll need to describe how you're using the equipment, whether it's new or existing, the new purchase cost, how long you are depreciating it over, and the residual value at the end. And all these calculations need to be in line with your own accountancy practices. Okay, subcontract costs. If this cost is going to be significant, you'll need to justify who, why, and what you need them for both here and in your application form. It's really important that you do justify the use of subcontractors with your application form because the assessors will not see this level of detail, so you need to make sure you mention that. If you do use a parent company, please ensure you list a cost and do not include any profit.
Okay, travel and subsistence costs. Here you would include things such as essential meetings that need to happen during the project. You cannot include any sales or marketing activity as that is ineligible. Other costs. So here, just check your finance guide for what costs can be included here. If you're unsure, please do not hesitate to contact our customer service department. So this will be for any other costs that don't fit in the other categories. For example, any training, preparation of a technical report, or patent filing costs for new IP. You can put those in there. Okay, so your project cost review. Once you're happy that all your project costs have been added to the system, you'll be given a final opportunity to review. You also need to confirm that the costs you have included are eligible as per the project cost guidance, and then mark this section as complete. This is really, really important. Maybe you've got that circle there. It says mark as complete. You won't be able to submit your application if you don't. Finances. So now we're going to look at the organisation. Okay, you can see on the screen here the information that we asked you to provide. Your organisation size determines the amount of grant funding percentage your organisation is eligible to receive. The other information will help with our financial viability checks if your application is successful. If you are a recent startup company who hasn't yet had a financial year, you can input zeros. If your application is successful, you will need to be registered on Companies House before any funding is released. Okay, looking at the funding section. Okay, as previously mentioned, the level of funding awarded will depend upon the type of organisation and the type of research being undertaken in your project. IFS will calculate your grant percentage based on the answers that you yourself give. I can't see the table, so I'll have to turn around a bit. So this is just as a reminder, and this will all be in the project guidance. So here we're looking at the types of organisation. So if you're a business and you're doing technical feasibility and industrial, you can have small as 70, medium 60, large 50. Experimental, I should say, because that's slightly closer to market. Small's 45, medium 35, large 25. If you are a research organisation, gosh, universities, 100%, which is the 80% of the full economic cost, but you must be non-profit distributing and disseminate your project results. I sound really strange. Do I sound okay? Oh, gosh, it's getting feedback. Disseminate the project results and explain in the application form how you're going to do this. For any other charities or public sector, you get 100%, but again, the caveat is you must be performing research activity and you must disseminate the project results and explain in the application form how you do this. Right. Funding. So there is no conditional offer letter with IFS, which is why it is very, very important that each organisation acknowledges and accepts the standard terms and conditions before the application is submitted. Your funding will ask you to confirm the percentage of grant funding that you require. Whilst IFS tells you the maximum you're eligible, some partners choose to claim less. For other funding, if you have any other public sector funding for this project and for this project only, you must declare it here, and then the total amount of that funding will come off the total project costs. Okay, finances overview. So at the end, you put all your costs in. Before submitting your application, you are able to review your application finances. This page states the funding rules for the competition, including eligible total project costs and project duration. Please check these figures are in line with the funding rules. We make so many applications ineligible because this is where everyone goes wrong. We cannot stress the total project costs are within the published eligible costs rather than the funding sort. So please make sure if you're at 12-month and you're up to 100k, that's your total project cost, not your funding. You're not allowed up to 100k funding for up to 12 months. So you really, really must make sure and be very clear on that point. Okay, non-grant claiming, so if you're not requesting funding, you can simply select the not requesting funding tab and the system will automatically update and grey out the other sections. Okay, academic partners. If you have any academic partners within your consortium, they'll be very, very familiar with this. They need to complete a JES form. The form validates the cost for us. Innovate UK do not look after this form, so we have some helpline numbers in a minute that you can go to if you require them. This is what the form will look like, the page for any academics. Okay, they go in and they complete their JES form. The academics will need to include their unique reference number and then input their figures. And please ensure the figures that they provide on this form and in your finance summary are identical. And the form, as Laura said, must be with a with council status. Okay, you must ensure all academic partners complete the justification of resources and the pathways to impact on the JES form, as this is the information the assessors will look at. Again, I think we've got helpline numbers there if you need to use them. So, submitting your application. This is the summary, I should say, of the project costs available to all the organisations in the project. You'll not be able to see any more detail or breakdown of anyone else's cost, and this is what the assessor sees. Please be aware that finances must be correct before the lead applicant can submit. Basically, oh yes, just make sure that you've actually the right amount of grant for the right amount of research that you're doing. All sections must be marked as complete before you're able to submit your application, and IFS will highlight in red any of the areas that you haven't yet completed, and they must all be green before you can complete. So, submitting your application. This is what you'll get at the very last stage. We see a lot of applicants who complete the application but don't complete the final steps. So please ensure you do click submit application. You wouldn't believe how many times this actually happens, that you submit, do everything is perfect, but you don't click that last button. The lead will receive a confirmation email after submitting. This is quite a useful slide. We are able to track submission uploads. So the table here shows the applicants submitting their proposals and each hour, so it's showing you each hour how many were actually getting submitted towards the noon deadline. As you can see, the vast majority leave it to the last minute. We sit there in Innovate and we're pressing the button and it's like 1 minute, 2 minutes towards, towards 12 o'clock, and people are still putting their applications in. If you fail for ever reason, you have a technical issue, your application will not go through, irrelevant if you're up to 100%, if you don't click that button before 12 o'clock, so I have to stress that. Once you have submitted, this is the email that you will get. IFS will send the lead applicant an email to confirm the application has been submitted, and it just tells you all about what's going to happen next. The dashboard looks like this. So you've created your account, you put your application in, you've been successful. So the top one there, medical devices, is showing that it's in project setup. So that's successful, and you need to complete the 7 steps that I'll show you in a minute. The other one is in progress, so it's just waiting to be assessed. Okay. So applications are assessed, involves a scope check by the sector team, and then it's reviewed by 5 independent assessors, and feedback is collated into a final score, and if an interview, if you do need to do an interview, which I don't think you do in this competition. Assessors tell us time after time they want clarity, detail and justification to see that the applicant has presented a viable opportunity for growth with an exciting, innovative area where public funding will make a real difference, and that they have the right people and the right approach to run a successful project and exploit the results. So please answer the questions that are in the guidance. They are there as a guide, but they are what the assessors will be looking for you to answer, so please make sure, and I think Chris is going to go through those in a minute. So the assessors can award you the maximum marks. Even if you have a fantastic idea but you don't answer the questions, you won't score very well. The lead, as we said, will be notified when the feedback is available, and then they'll go onto their dashboard to view. Okay, very quickly, these are the project setup stages that need to be completed by all the partners within 30 days. It's not a line in the sand by any means, but we really do need this done within 30 days. You can start project setup, I should say, as soon as you've been notified that you are successful, but your project should start within the normal 90 days. Innovate have actually withdrawn funding because that hasn't started in time. So this is a real key thing. So 30 days to complete your project setup, and then your project must start within 90 days, or we could withdraw the funding. We don't issue a conditional offer letter, as we've said, because you're signing up to our T's and C's as you're going through the application. The lead partner does have visibility of the progress of all the partners, and they have the responsibility of making sure that their partners push through all the setup stages. We'll assign you a monitoring officer, which will be your main point of contact. We'll review all your finances to make sure that you are in line. If you aren't, we'll let you know. Communication at each stage will be through IFS, so you just need to make sure that none of the emails are going through into your junk, and make sure you go in there and monitor them regularly and answer all the questions. One thing to note, this is another change, project change requests. After you have put submit an application in, if you want to put in a project change request, your application will be withdrawn and you'll be asked to go into the next competition. So be very, very clear on that, because that used to happen quite a lot and we don't allow it anymore. So collaboration agreement, every project needs to have a collaboration agreement. We frequently see these they take such a long time to do that it actually holds up the project startup. So you really, really do need to make sure you start this as soon as possible. Finally, grant paid, claims and payments. You've entered your costs, you're successful, and start your project. You need to be aware that we pay your claims quarterly in arrears. So if you're a small organisation, be wise to manage your cash flow. It can catch some companies out. The pattern of claim payments can impact on the cash flow as paid quarterly in arrears. I think I've just said that. Another thing to bear in mind, that all costs have to be incurred and paid between the start and the end date of the project. You cannot claim for costs before the project has received confirmation to start or after it has finished. That was a whiz through, so I'm very sorry. It was very, very quick. Again, like Chris said, there's contacts here. If anyone has any questions on process, finance, unclear about anything or scope, please do come through to our customer support line. Just make sure we've got 48 hours to answer, basically, and the questions are audited and monitored, so they go through. So if you do need any help, customer service, KTN number is there, and any other information about Innovate UK, please do go on our website and have a look. Thank you. Very quick. Like I say, this recording and these slides will be up on the web page, so you can review at a later date. Thank you. Are we refreshments now and do questions later, or?
Are there any quick questions?
We are running slightly late, but I would take a few questions now. So we also have one from...
Hi, Karen Schmidt from Predictimmune. You mentioned the assessor process.
Yes.
And I'm always struck by how the assessors are provided with guidelines for their scoring, and that you don't publish those same guidelines for the applicants. And help me to understand why you've taken that stance and not given the applicant the leg up to actually address the questions that the reviewer is scoring against.
I was about to say, Chris is going through those.
I'm not going to publish every single one. I'm going to explain how it's worked out. So just for the webcast. Oh, sorry.
You've got to talk, Chris.
Yeah. They can't hear me. Yes, that's a valuable question, so I'm going to go through that in the next section. I'm not going to go through each 10 questions, but I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to explain what the guidance looks like, and it's quite straightforward, so that'll explain the rest as well. So we are going to do that, because you're right, it's not that fair, so we're going to change that. I can escape.
Good. Thank you. Oh.
Howard Sherman from Safeguard Biosystems. Historically, if you've got a project with an SME and an academic, there have been percentages that there's a restriction on the amount that an academic in a project is able to participate in.
Yes.
Does that still apply? And if so, what are they?
We have a different rate for this competition, but our usual is 70 business, 30 academic, but for this competition it's 50. So 50% must be from business and 50% from academia, but if you do have two research organisations, that they will share that 50%.
Okay, thank you.
That's total project costs.
And the other part was, you talked about dissemination. If as part of the project, on the feasibility, you are pulling together sensitive market information, are you then saying and there's an academic on the project, we still have to disseminate that to third parties where the potential commercial disadvantage for having done it in the first place would kick in?
Are you able to? I'm not able to answer that one.
So, which bit was the dissemination?
Dissemination. You
The
have
dis-
to disseminate. If you've got a research on your a research organisation on your project, part of the caveat of it is you have to disseminate your results.
I think that's for research organisations. We don't expect you to give away commercially sensitive information. I think that's more
Yeah.
of a research obligation than ours, to be honest. That's why, and again, we do have a public-facing description because we don't expect companies to give away secrets for obvious reasons.
Right, okay, that's fine, because some of what we might want to dig out, we wouldn't want to share with the competition.
No, obviously, no. So that's there's no expectation of that. And again, that's why there is a public-facing, there's a public abstract that you put in by the competition, and that's what we publish. Because this is public money, we do have to tell everybody who we fund and the amount, and you have to present an abstract which you're happy is published. So not completely bland, they give us some money. So we need some details, but we don't expect to give away company secrets for obvious reasons. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
From the webcast.
So Simon Bennett is asking whether the money provided can be used to help fund employee training, such as part-time masters.
I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
Well, maybe we can get back to you, Simon.
No, I don't know the answer. So what we'll do, I'll take. Oh, Richard, can you answer it, Richard? Yeah, the whole team.
Thank you. So just to recap, the question was about can you use Innovate UK grant for training purposes for masters? Yeah. No, you can't. No, that's not an eligible cost.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, maybe we can break for 10 minutes. And we can reconvene here at 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Well, the logic is that we don't
Please take a seat. There will be plenty of time later on to network.
We might be able to just drag that line. Can we drag that line? No, that's the wrong way around.
Sorry. Okay, no. So we were trying to do something, but clearly. I don't know how to make it bigger. The slide here is
bigger, so
I don't know how to make the slide bigger in here. I think that's the way it is. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Right. Unfortunately, the slides here are so small I can't actually read them, so I'm going to have to sort of keep turning my back, if that's okay. Right, so what we're going to do for the next hour or so is we've got 3 companies to sort of present their perspectives on applying for and working with Innovate UK on projects. But what I thought I would do very quickly is just go through some of the issues which have actually been raised already, try to give you a bit of an insight into some of the common mistakes that companies make, certainly for applying for stuff, and some of the things we picked up during the sort of project. So here are some issues to consider. So 3 companies, and we'll have a quick Q&A panel session afterwards. So I'll ask the companies to sit down and you can ask any questions that you've got. So, yes, first one, make sure the application is within scope. Again, that's rather an obvious one. To reiterate, for the feasibility area, as long as it's within the kind of our definition of precision medicine, that's fine for that sort of area. So it's looking at more the diagnostic, monitoring, screening side of stuff. For collaborative R&D, then there's 4 specific areas and the sort of 3 grand challenges that it needs to be within scope. So by far the most important question is answer the question properly. And again, we had the question a minute ago. I'm going to give an example of the first question, which I changed slightly. Fortunately, we now have the opportunity to sort of fine-tune the questions. So not only do we write the questions, we also write the assessor guidance. So I'm going to give you the first example. The logic behind it is quite clear, so I don't think it requires going through every other question afterwards. You'll get the logic behind it. And I think the most important thing is to appreciate, if you don't, that we have a pass quality threshold of 70%. So if you get below 70%, you're not going to get funded realistically. And it's usually sort of mid-70s upwards, which actually end up getting funded. But as you'll see, we write the scoring. So a well-answered question, you should be in the 7, 8, 9, 10 mark. Anyway, if you get less than that, you're going to have to try and make an effort not to answer the question, really. So here's question 1. So the need or challenge. So what's healthcare challenge, proposed project addresses, et cetera, and we've got sort of 4 bullet points there. So what are the challenges being addressed, current approaches, how have you assessed healthcare challenge, and what previous work have you done? So that's and there's no particular order of those, but there's sort of 4 points that we've got that we expect you to answer. And if you then go to what the assessor sees, we give them this, essentially. So the same question, and as you'll see, there are essentially sort of 5 areas, 5 bands they can mark to 1 to 2, 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we give a description of what we're looking for. So if they can award 9 to 10, basically you have to give very solid answers to everything. So compelling healthcare challenge, clear review of the current approaches, convincing argument why their proposed solution would be an improvement, and the work they've already done. So it's not difficult. It's pretty much have they answered those questions in a very convincing manner, 9 or 10 points. And then it's essentially a scale downwards. So 7 or 8, good healthcare, good. They've explained stuff. They've answered all the questions. They've done good answer, not not the absolute perfection, but they've answered everything properly, given good answers, and that's pretty much our benchmark. That's the 7, 8 that you need to be getting to. If you answer the questions, you should be in that band. That shouldn't really be a difficult thing. So the 4 points, as you can see, they're reflected in the assessor guidance. If you answer them properly, you'll be in that sort of band. And then you get down to, a good challenge, but lack of understanding of current approaches, and it sort of scales its way down to no evidence of a healthcare challenge, no references to current approaches, no relevant information. To be honest, you'd pretty much leave the space blank to get that bad. So you'll see for each question there's a sort of 4 or 5 points. If you give convincing answers to all of those points, you'll get 9 to 10. If it's good, 7 to 8. Less than that, you probably haven't really tried. So these aren't difficult questions. We're not trying to trick you. We're not trying to trip you up. But as you'll see, if you just answer everything, if you put down everything you can think of, then that's not going to be reflected in the assessor scores necessarily. So please understand that those 4 points are very much reflected in the answer. And it's designed so that good answer will give you 7 or 8%, which is why our quality threshold is 70%. So answer the question. Again, there's a limited space. It's good if you can enthuse the assessor, so it's not just quite such an automatic process, but that's when they look at it, that's the kind of assessor array they'll be working with. So for each of the other ones, there'll be 4 or 5 points, and it's essentially the same thing. Convincing arguments to all of them, good, not answered. So it's a pretty straightforward process. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, that's pretty straightforward, I think. Some of the other things that we have issue with, I think the main one is being realistic about the amount of work you can do in the time available and with the money available. Personally, I prefer to see something that's well-defined, costed properly, rather than something where you try and cram everything in. You don't get extra points for it. And again, we do have problems with lots of projects overrunning, so that if you put too much in, and it doesn't look realistic in terms of the money you think it's going to cost or the timescale, I advise assessors to mark down for it because it's not realistic. We want something done properly, well, simple, well-defined, well-costed. That's what we're after. We're not here to just save money. It's not the cheapest answer. It's actually, look at it realistically. You can do it in the time available, for the cost available. Good, that's fine. I say we do advise assessors to mark on that principle as well. We don't tend to see many sort of plan Bs in our things. It's very linear. This is our project. If things go wrong, there is no plan B. It would be good if you could add a plan B or just have some idea or some milestones. It's something that we don't see happen very often. It's a very linear process, and it does cause problems, a company's problems in the future. So if you've got a clear idea what your plan B is, particularly, clinical trial recruitment rates don't work, that sort of thing, or one of your partners pulls out, please think about those things earlier on and put that into the actual plan as well. And clear milestones and that sort of thing. That reflects well, I think, on the actual application. Yes, the project costs. I think to reiterate again, this is where we can lose up to 1/3 of our applications in one foul swoop, is they don't understand total project costs and grant costs. So we will fund up to £100,000 in feasibility. That doesn't mean you get £100,000. If you're an SME, you're allowed 70%, so you can claim for £70,000. What you can't do is claim for £100,000 and then up your project cost to 140, and that's sort of relative scale. And believe me, this happens all the time, and there are times when we, literally have got rid of 1/3 of the applications based on these sort of issues. So to reiterate it over and over and over again, £100,000 is the total project cost of which you will get a percentage of based on whether you're an SME or a larger company. So please bear that in mind. It's mentioned, but we mention it every time and it's still a problem. So to go through it again, that's what you have to be wary of. And again, it's always worth getting somebody else to look at your application. It's amazing, especially startup tech people, engineers in particular, are very good at writing down a whole load of spiel, which doesn't make sense to anybody else. So please get somebody else to read through it. And again, if you can explain the assessor process, it's worth doing. Just somebody who's not an expert, although our assessors are expert in their area, they won't know absolutely everything. So try and pitch to the right level. Get somebody else to read it within an organisation. Also, the KTN are there to help you do that sort of thing. So please make use of them as a resource. Running the projects themselves. So extensions is an issue. We used to be quite flexible on that. We're not now, to be blunt. Again, this comes back to the well-defined thing. If you run out of time to do stuff, the chance of getting an extension is limited, to be honest. So again, you're not going to necessarily do yourself any favour because you won't get paid for work if you don't do it on time. And again, when it comes to, in particular, moving money across at the end of a financial year, we have to spend with, I think, 1% of our budget, and considering we're spending £600 million, that sort of stuff, that's not a lot of room for error. So, and again, it's unfair because it's money we lose from one year and then we have to spend from another year, so it's a kind of double whammy for us. So moving money across financial year is essentially not an option anymore. Be aware of that, and please, again, come down. When you plan your project, think about that, be realistic. The biggest problem we've always had is clinical trial rate, clinical recruitment rates. I think, that's a problem for everybody. Please have a plan B. If you've got a 2-year project and you're leaving it up to 18 months and go, there's a bit of an issue, that's not very helpful and nothing we can do to help you. So please put in some proper milestones, have a plan B for your benefit more than ours. But again, these are things that clinical recruitment rates are the biggest single thing that seems to go wrong for our projects during their lifetime. Again, sometimes partners pulling out, that usually tends to happen early on. Again, not something you can always necessarily do something about, but again, it's something that is an issue for us sometimes. There is a project change request during the lifetime of a project. Everyone will complain it takes too long to do. So if there is an issue, please talk to your MO and deal with it early on. But again, there are things we can say yes to quickly, some things we can't. So please bear that in mind. So that we've got some companies to come along who will be able to give better advice on this than I can do. So we're going to have 3 companies now. They're going to give their perspectives, and then we'll do a quick sort of panel Q&A at the end, I think. So we've got Banjo from Perspectum. We put Prospectum for some reason in a couple of things, but I think that's a very different concept. So Banjo from Perspectum Diagnostics.
Hi there, thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks for organising this, Julia. I don't know if the slides are going to come up automatically. I'm probably the least technical. I'll tell you why that's a good thing in a second. Oh, perfect. That's okay, as long as it's big for them. Okay, so my name's Rajashi Banerjee. Because of that, my nickname's Banjo. I'm CEO of Perspectum Diagnostics. Perspectum has had successes with Innovate UK and has failures with Innovate UK, so I think I've been asked to speak about some of those so that you can learn from the potholes we sank into and from the mountains that we enjoyed climbing together. So we developed a scan in Oxford. You may have seen it last night. It was on a program called Crash Diets with Susan Jebb and Paul Aviard, called Liver Multiscan. It effectively replaces liver biopsy for many indications. And it used MR technology that we developed in the UK, we patented in the UK, and historically we always used to sell that kind of technology to Siemens. Siemens would sit on it for the best part of a lifetime and maybe release it in product format. I was born as an only child and I'm quite impatient, so I didn't want that to happen to what I thought was a transformative technology for liver patients. So with some support from the University of Oxford, we created a spin-out from my PhD in 2012. Pretty much the first thing we did on creating that spin-out was we spoke to someone called Alistair Gore, who had Chris's job back then. And we explained to him that we knew absolutely nothing. We're on webinar, so I won't swear, it was worse than nothing, about commerce or setting up a company, but we had really in terms of being able to transform liver patients' care pathway. And we'd have to go through all the problems associated with bringing that kind of technology to market, the biggest of which is clinical adoption, which I'll talk about at the end. But would Innovate UK be able to help us? And Alistair then, much like Chris now, is probably the most important resource in the room for the stuff that's unsaid. As in, are you really sure you want to start a company? If you really want to go at this, one of you's got to go full time, that kind of stuff. And he helped us draft our first us about competitions like this and explain the format. It's 10 questions. It is not an academic application. So if you fill it out like an academic, you're guaranteed to lose. In fact, the academics on the reviewing panels are almost always the biggest pains in the ass because they're the ones that can't be coached to do it right. They're the wild card. So initially I used to hate that about Innovate UK. Now I've come just to accept it because it happens religiously every time. We then had this technology, we applied for a project, and we And so we did this with a couple of universities and a software development company, et cetera, et cetera. 3 years later, this is the care pathway that we've started to transform. So basically, if you have liver, this is the pitch that I basically took to Alistair 5.5 years ago. If you have liver disease, and there's a lot of people with liver disease, you basically have to have a biopsy to confirm diagnosis. If you talk to a liver doctor, they'll say the same thing, because they don't know much about imaging. It's a bit like asking horses about the future of cars. We were confident that we could use experience in other health sectors like cardiology and neurology. I trained as a cardiologist to say, well, actually, we can replace some of these invasive diagnostics with non-invasive diagnostics, but it's a long journey. And Innovate UK crucially helped us bridge those first couple of steps of going from idea to first clinical trial to first FDA-cleared product. And we did that in pretty quick succession. That was within the life cycle of one Innovate UK project. So when the bar's quite high on applications, I'm expecting that there's probably, I don't think we're a complete unicorn, there's probably a company just as exciting in this room in front of me now. And so for the people who don't win this competition, you've probably lost out to a really, really exciting company. That's what I would say to the other guys we beat in 2012. What we built was something called Liver Multiscan, which is MRI post-processing software. So instead of a liver biopsy, you do an MRI, you send it to us, we analyze it, we send it back to you, and we charge you for it. Now, at the time, us being completely naive academics and clinicians, which is worse than academics, we thought this would be great. If it works, people will pay us. Oh, my word, getting money from any kind of hospital is so hard. But doing good science has great intrinsic value. So all the plans that we made, so Chris talked about Plan Bs. Plan Bs for commercialization are also important. So making direct sales to hospitals, incredibly hard. Making direct sales to pharma and precision medicine and drug development, actually pretty easy. And actually, unbeknownst to us back in 2012, but thankfully for us now, much more lucrative. So you go from being a company expecting revenue in the hundreds of thousands to having, upwards of $10 million per year revenue expectation, because frankly, pharma's a multi-billion-dollar business and we're probably still undercharging. The IP that we had going into Liver Multiscan is still the same foundational IP. So what we discovered is if you, much as many of you probably are more in the circulating biomarker domain, if you acquire an MR fingerprint of an organ, you can determine animal fingerprints and phenotypes. And some of that fingerprinting relies on being able to separate signals by the tissue characteristics of an organ that develop that signal. So for example, this is the only equation I'm going to use, so don't worry. There are two aspects of the liver, the water content and the iron content, that affect the T1 relaxation time that you measure in an MR signal. If you can separate them out, you can separately measure the iron content of the liver and the fibroinflammatory content of the liver. That's what we do. Luckily for us, those are two of the key questions that a liver doctor looking at a liver biopsy wants to know. The kind of clinical trials you want to do, so this was more in my forte. Now I'm comfortable. We've got a technology. We've agreed that I'm rubbish at commercialization, but I know the kind of technology that I want to use in my patients because my background training is clinical. So what do I want to know? I want to know that it's at least as good as whatever's currently out there, and ideally better. And to be better, it has to have better health outcomes. So what am I showing here? On the left, we're showing that the scan parallels histology. So if you used to have a biopsy and now you have a scan, we'll give you roughly the same result. And on the right, I'm showing you that we predict clinical outcomes. So basically, if you have one of our scans and you have a normal result, I can reassure you, I can send you home. It's good for both of us. If you have a bad scan, then I need to bring you back to clinic. I need to worry about whether you're going to have liver cancer or develop liver failure in the coming 3 to 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. And this is relevant to the UK because liver disease is one of the fastest rising epidemics, as my colleagues on the BBC much more eloquently than me said yesterday. How do we deliver it? So this is, again, completely different to the conversations I had with Alistair back then, and probably some of the conversations you'll have with Chris and others now. At the time, we'd build this, we'd sell it as a box, hospitals would adopt it, and they'd pay us for it. Well, I've already said hospitals aren't going to pay you for a box. They're certainly not going to pay you a lot. But one thing that you can do is you can develop a service and become a data company. So now, as a hospital, you don't want to pay for this, but you can still use the service, and we gather data with the appropriate contractual arrangements and consents, etc., that allows us to map the prevalence of liver disease in the UK, the US, the Far East, etc. Why do people care about that? Well, lots of bodies are actually interested in epidemiology. So for any epidemiologists in the room, it's okay, you still have a career. And that kind of, again, plan B on the commercialization side, I think the Innovate UK forms do, I know they're small, the question and answer sessions, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you put in that kind of thought, as in we intend to monetize this product or this service in this way and this way and this way, that implies some degree of thought has gone into it, rather than we're just going to build it and it's going to fly off the shelves, because that's not credible. This is the patient pathway we want to transform, and I think we are transforming it, but not necessarily in the way we thought we would. So slowly we are getting away from liver biopsy and we're making patients happier, but it's not quite as we predicted 5 years ago. And these are the kind of reports that we're producing. I think we're coming up to time, so I'll speed up now. So again, it's like a biochemistry report. Some thought needs to go into this in the duration of your project. As you develop a product, it does some cool stuff. Some really smart people in this room. Smart people are required to communicate to the whole population. So how are you going to communicate your test, no matter how complicated it is, with someone who an average GP has 9 minutes to interface with, and they want to talk to them about the outcome of your test, not just decode your test result. That's why we designed, in one of our Innovate UK projects, what the output report would look like in conjunction with patient groups. And so these are then the final success stories. So this is a hepatitis C patient treated in Oxford, doesn't need to have biopsies. We can show him getting better. Most importantly, we can show his drug company that their drug works and is getting better. And this is now some of the marketing material for a hepatitis C drug. Those budgets extend into the billions. Happy days. This is a patient with a rare disease in which there's basically zero investment, called primary sclerosing cholangitis. There are no therapies for it. It's a terrible disease. But we can now phenotype it and monitor it much closer than we've ever been able to do before. And so we're building together a cohort of these patients with rare disease, building a community, that's good for them, and building a research infrastructure that will allow us to find future therapies, which will be precision therapies, because this is an autoimmune condition. And then finally, what did we say to Alistair all that time ago? We want to do this because of fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease is one of the biggest epidemics facing the UK right now. And we were true to our word. So we may have had to go down a lot of plan Bs and plan Cs in product development and commercialization, but fundamentally the technology still does what we wanted it to do. You now have a test that can determine if someone has fatty liver disease and how significant it is, and you can stratify their care based on it. And this is similar to the data that was shown yesterday on the BBC. And this is where we sit in competitor positioning, which allows us to go to market and sell successfully in some territories, if not always the UK. We talked about biobank earlier, so one of the earliest applications of this was phenotyping the biobank population's liver, and we've published on that, and there's been some press about that as well. The UK is pretty high up on the list of places in the world with a lot of liver disease, and that's also been picked up by Europe and the US military. And these are the kind of data that we can continue doing. So for the academics in the room who are moving into industry, you're still allowed to think, you're still allowed to publish. In fact, you're encouraged to do so. It's just you have to do it on a tighter timeline now. So here you can see that this is the population of the UK from Biobank, and we can identify the patients who have or are most likely to have aggressive fatty liver disease. These are the patients that we should be targeting. So these data are of use to people like Public Health England. So these are the summary conclusions that I have. These are the kind of claims that I expect companies in the room to be making. And I guess what I wanted to say is, I'm very grateful for Innovate UK for giving us that first lever up to be able to do some of the things we do now. But our story was not linear. There were many things we did wrong and some things we did that were cool but off kilter. And so, although we're very grateful to Innovate UK, for everybody in the room, I would say, don't expect it to be straightforward. You write the application, you win, you go to market. And the reviewers, certainly the industry reviewers for this grant, will understand if there are some complexities or questions to answer, which is why there's an entire section on risk. Most important thing really, and this is from the government, so Lord O'Shaughnessy, who's a ridiculously young lord, he's only 42, came to Oxford yesterday to look at Perspectum and the university and its spin-out infrastructure. The most important thing is the people in the room at any given time. So within your company, just have a good look around before you start making this application and look at the human capital that you're going to develop. So I'm going to pick out a couple of examples. These are 3 guys that work at Perspectum. They're all pretty young, probably younger than most people in this room. Each one of these guys has executed a contract with a deal value in excess of $2 million. And they've all done that within 2 or 3 years of entering industry. So I don't know how many employees many of you have, but if you've got people who can do that, your company's going to do very well. And then we hire new people and train them to do effectively the same thing. So it is a virtuous cycle. And the great thing about investing in healthcare companies is healthcare is a lifetime fundamental, and I would applaud all of you for having already done that. Thank you.
What I'm going to do is ask all the presenters to come up at the end, and we'll just do a panel at the end, if that's okay. So next up, Jane Green from Oxford Biodynamics. Thank you.
Right, I'd like to thank Innovate for inviting us here today. And I'm just going to talk to you about who we are and the problems and trials and tribulations as we went through the grant itself. So Oxford Biodynamics was the lead applicant in 2014 in the Neurodegenerative Diseases Diagnosis and Care Management competition. And we went into a collaboration with 2 other collaborators, which was Oxford University and Cronus Therapeutics. The project was started by my predecessor, Magda Janash, and with 2 other people from our company, Dr. Kulichev and Dr. Jordan. And they then got together with the other collaborative groups to write the application, and it was successful. And the kick-off meeting started in April 15. I joined the company 4 days later. So I became the project manager designee, and in our company, we always have a designee, so that if somebody's off on holiday or whatever, someone can take over, which was a good job because Magda left a year later, and I took over as the project manager for the job. So, tips for application. Look at the website for guidance. It tells you all you need to know. Justify your aim. That's the really important thing, because you're going up against everybody else in this room and other people besides, and yours needs to stand out. More than anybody else's, yours needs to stand out. We work under ISO 13485, so we have a great quality management system, quality document system. But don't do more than you have to. Grants are generally documentation heavy, and so there's lots of reporting that goes on. So at every milestone, you have to do a project team report. Some of our mistakes was just silly mistakes. So timesheets, you heard about those earlier. We have our own timesheet system, but we made extra timesheets for this process. That was just nonsense. We did initiation closure documents for every work package. You just needed one at the beginning and one at the end. And conceptual designs, you didn't need all of those. We just could have got on with it, really. So you then go through quarterly meetings. So every quarter, you have a project plan and a progress report that you have to produce. You send it to your monitoring officer. We were lucky, we had the same monitoring officer all the way through our project, which is great because you get a rapport with them. You then have to collaborate with your collaborators, make the project report and the progress report. You send it round, and as the lead one, you have to get everything together, send it off on time just before your quarterly meeting, and then you produce an exploitation plan, because don't forget, this is an applied grant. It's not a fundamental grant. It's got to go somewhere at the end. So you need that exploitation plan. Where is your results going to go? You then do your meeting. You then go through the whole process. Then you have to also do all of this plus your experimental reports as well on top of everything. You go through the meeting, the monitoring officer agrees everything, then you edit your progress report again, and then you send it back off to them. So there's a lot of work to do as you're going through the projects. So what's the difference? And I always found this quite difficult to actually understand. The project plan is the whole project itself. So what are you doing? What's going to happen? And any changes that you make will be made as you go through. Now, normally, a project plan would be you would make an amendment and your project plan would stay the same. But in this case, you amend it as you go through, so you do version control. So that's a little bit odd for me as a project manager, but still, it worked. The progress report is just what it says on the tin. It's the progress to where you are in that project at a time. So that's the difference between the two. Also, Innovate will give you a Gantt chart that you need to fill in and modify with your timings on as you go through. But our monitoring officer also wanted a workflow progress chart as well for every work package. So we started off all blue and then went to green as we got through the actual packages. Finances. So you've just heard about finances, but it is an important part of your project. So at the application, you need to outline your finances, just follow the procedure that's on there. And then in quarter one, you then upload your finances to a site called Connect. And then you have to produce an independent accountant's report for that quarter. And you do that not only for you, but for your collaborators as well. So you, as a lead project manager, I would then have to get all the collaborators together, bring those all in, and then they upload them separately to the Connect. Once you've done that, your monitoring officer will check everything, make sure everything is okay, and then you'll say, yes, you can upload to Connect. Tip, make sure you do it in the time allocated, because as soon as the monitoring officer says, you get this time limit, and if you don't get it in time, it causes real problems. So it's about, as I said before, getting things in on time. You also have to forecast for the next quarter, and this is important to Innovate because they need to know how much they're budgeting for each quarter, and you have to be quite accurate on your forecast. So when you upload to Connect, you upload your finances, you also upload a forecast for the next quarter as well. At the end of the project, you then do your final accountant's report, which is from quarter 2 to the end of your project. And that has to be an independent person that will validate that as well for you. So just to give you a bit of background about what we did, our project was on the development of prognostic epigenetic markers for ALS, which is motor neuron disease. So we were looking at defining episwitch markers, which are the red bars on this diagram here. And you can see that we were trying to determine a disease, ALS, away from controls. So you'd see the red loop there, could be your controls. And then your ALS patients would have a different conformation, which would be the blue loops. So we're trying to distinguish conformation structure from an ALS patient rather than a control patient. We used blood to do this. So we would split blood down, ask various chemicals, split down again, and the whole process takes us about 4 hours to do. So it's not a time-consuming project, but we have to do that for all the samples that we go through. We can then analyse them by PCR or sequencing or array. We do all of those things. So when it comes to the work packages for the project, we had 6 work packages split into sub-work packages. And these were also to do with our collaborators as well. So the first collaborator, Oxford University, would provide us with the ALS samples. We then worked with Kronos to get us a second subset of samples from their trial. And then we would validate them using an array and then validate again using PCR for both diagnostic and prognostic. We then used binded samples for the diagnostic and prognostic part of it. And then we would do the response to the treatment from the Kronos trial with an array and PCR again. And then we do data analysis. Then a problem occurred. The collaborators, Tara Kronos. ALS is a very difficult disease to work with because you have fast and slow progressors. And the fast progressors in their trial passed away very quickly, and the slow progressors passed away also relatively quickly. So we didn't have any samples from those collaborators' trial. So that affected all the work packages, 4 work packages in green. So Innovate has gone on about this, and it's really important to have a plan B, because you get through a sort of third part of your project and you've got no samples. So we had to salvage the project. We had to come up with a plan B. We submitted a project change request. Tip, when you do submit, if you do get down to submitting a project change request, do as much as you can in the background while you're waiting for that project change request to come through, because it does take a while to come through. And in the meantime, sometimes you can't carry on with anything. So we were doing some background work, which we knew that the company could fund if we didn't get the project change request. So what we did was, we took the ALS patients from the Oxford University. They were collecting 100 ALS patients for us, and 100 controls, and 100 at 3 months, and 100 at 6 months. And instead of using 100, we used 75. That allowed us to go for work package 4A and 4B, that we could use those 25 samples as a blinded sample. So that got us around that problem immediately. We're lucky at Oxford Biodynamics in that we have a Penang subsidiary as well as an Oxford subsidiary. We've known from work that we've done previously that there are ethical backgrounds in 3C loops. We know that. So we decided that we would go with our Penang group. They would submit another ethical approval and try to collect different ethnicity samples for us. So that would mean that we could use 5B and we could do the additional screening on different ethnicities. The other thing that we put into there is our project used to be a nested PCR project. Now we're using qPCR, so we brought in the new technology to actually then use it for 5A. So we managed to get round all of the problems of losing our trial and be able to bring in some new parts to the project. So, how big has the impact been? Well, we managed to produce some very, very successful diagnostic and prognostic markers from this study. It helps us understand and predict the speed of progression of the disease. And we've showed that they can be effective. We've produced biomarkers for both prognostic and diagnostic, and the impact of this is going to be huge. The outcomes, we're already working with a pharmaceutical company now to take on those biomarkers to the next stage. And critically, I think for the patients that are going into something like an ALS study, it's benefited them knowing that they're contributing to something that can then potentially improve the diagnosis of the disease. And for ALS, that's very important because there isn't much out there. And so the project has contributed to the identification and understanding of biological pathways and hopefully new therapies in future. And I'd like to thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker for the panel is Everard from Sarissa.
So my name is Everard Mascarenas. I'm the CEO of Sarissa Biomedical. Would you like these? I can stand close if that helps.
As you wish.
Yeah, I'll stand close. What I'd like to do is just talk to you about our experience of getting grants. We've not had I'll show you a slide that says we've been very successful, but if you look at the timescale, we've been around for now 14 years. So, Banjo, absolutely amazing that you've taken this so well in 5 years. We still haven't got to the commercialization stage. So, Sarissa was spun out of Warwick University to commercialize the research of a very, very prominent neuroscientist called Nick Dale. What he effectively did was create the next generation of enzymatic biosensors. So it's glucose sensors, but 1,000 times more sensitive. And no one else in the world can measure analytes at the levels that he can using this technology. Technology like glucose is very fast. It's a finger prick blood test. Look at all the MEMS, look at all the microfluidics. Most of that never works. These enzymatic biosensors work. And it's a platform technology. We can do 16 or so analytes at the moment, and if there's an enzyme that reacts with it, we probably can make it. So Nick is a neuroscientist, and he knew that purines are a very, very important neurosignaling chemical. And he saw this as a diagnostic for brain trauma. The important thing about purines is that they're released at the very, very moment cells become metabolically stressed. And for many emergency conditions, the golden hour is where you need to be able to interact. So any proteomic type biomarkers are of no use. They take several hours to appear. He knew that purines were instantaneous. So we focused on stroke because there is no diagnostic test for stroke. It's a complete clinical judgment. CT scans can show bleeds. 85% of strokes are ischemic or blocks, and there is no test. So clinicians are flying by the seat of their pants. They have only 4.5 hours in which they can deliver clot-busting drugs. For every minute they delay giving the clot-busting drug, the patient loses 2 days of healthy lives. So time is of the essence, and they've got nothing to help them other than their expertise. So we have a real clinical need. About half of all suspected stroke patients are not strokes, they're mimics. This is an emergency condition. You have to act quickly, and just like any A&E department, the stroke units are stuffed full of people who are not strokes and don't need to be treated very quickly. So you have a huge need with some real productivity or operational constraints. And we thought, wait, this is great. Nick's got a test that can tell if you had a stroke or not. Go and tell a stroke clinician that there is something that can do the job better than he can, and forget it. It will never fly. So one of the things you will need to do when you're doing a grant application is really go out there and talk to people and understand exactly how your technology will be used in the real world. So what we found out is actually stroke clinicians, their biggest bane of their life are these mimics. They don't want them in the department. They're lying on their beds. They become bed blockers. So we turned it around and said, okay, we'll get rid of these people for you. That suddenly turned them on. So we now have a rule-out test rather than a rule-in test. The barrier in terms of regulatory approval is a lot lower because it's an aid to diagnosis. It's not a definitive diagnosis. We can do it very quickly, and it's a huge market. And we have a razor blade model. So lots of good commercial, operational productivity things in there. But as I said, this is the timeline over which we've been working. So Nick got his first grant, a Wellcome Trust grant, in 2004. And that helped him create the technology. For the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, he went around doing the classic academic trick of getting grants, writing grant applications, getting rejected. Now, Nick is a very prominent neuroscientist. He generally gets about $500,000 a year of grant funding through MRC, BBRC, etc., etc. So it's not that he doesn't know how to write grants, he doesn't know how to write Innovate grants. And what he didn't understand is that every time he put in his application, it was a very scientific application. The clinicians looked at it, because it was a clinical application, a clinical implementation, and they said, don't recognize any of this science, nothing to do with us, got no legs. So I was the VC that had backed Sarissa. And in 2010, I just turned around to Nick and said, Nick, you're wasting your time. And I dragged him up to Newcastle. I think it's the first time he's ever left his office to go and talk to people. So I dragged him up to Newcastle to meet Gary Ford, who's now the CEO of Oxford AHN, who's a stroke specialist. And we sat there for 2 hours, and Gary said, well, you know what, I think you might be onto something interesting. And at that time, we got the first buy-in from what I would talk, nowadays called the customer, that says, actually, this might be interesting, and this is what you've got to do. So we followed Gary's guidance, and we got a IFRI grant in 2013, which we started in 2014, and that was a 3-year project where it paid for the development of the device and clinical trials. So we came out in 2017 with a fully working device and also clinical data, which showed we had a very, very effective diagnostic for stroke. And at that time, we started working with clinicians who'd done the trials and started to build our expertise in that space. And I switched over from being the VC to being the CEO, because I thought this had legs. And then we went on and got a proof of market. We were starting to look at it from a commercial rather than scientific perspective. Once we'd got the data, we were able then to move on to an SBRI call, got phase 1, which increased the network of people we were working with. We were now only working with the stroke clinicians. We started to working with the ambulance trusts, and we were successful and won a £2 million call in 2017, which we're now working on, 3-year project. In addition to that, now we knew what we were doing, we knew where we were going, we talked to the wider world, we weren't sort of closeted in the academic world. We also sort of got a KTP, again, an Innovate stream, which is helping us develop the automation system for making the devices, and our customers start applying for grants off their own back. So we're part of a Horizon 2020 project, €3.5 million project, where we're not only getting grant money from them, but the partners are buying our devices as well. We're currently shortlisted for a Biomedical Catalyst 4 grant, and that will help us get it into clinic, used not as a blind clinical trial, but as a diagnostic aid. And the person leading that is Gary Ford, who we met in 2010. This journey with Gary has taken us the best part of 8 years. I'll come on to why that's significant in my view. The IFRI project was very successful, so IFRI are encouraging us to look at the next application and encourage us to make an application for that, so that's something we've had in our plan for 2019. And when we finished the biomedical catalyst, we're looking at the innovation technology payment system to try and get adoption. That's a system the NHS run, NHS England, where they put a central pot of money which hospitals can use to buy new technology. The point is, this is not just opportunistic. We have plans, we have thoughts, etc., etc. We're planning for all of this and not reacting to when grants come up. The point I'm trying to make here is you can make grants a strategic part of your business plan, or you can look at them just lucky opportunities. I've taken the approach that these are core bits of our game plan. So the SBRI project is helping us fund the quality management system we've put in place, which is quite a lot of effort and quite a lot of high cost. The KTP is helping us build the production line. If we get the Biomedical Catalyst Round 4 grant, it will get us first customer deployment, it will create all the marketing collateral we need to go out and sell. Then we have a 900-patient clinical trial being funded by SBRI, which will give us the sort of level of data which will allow us to go to NICE and get it developed on the NICE recommendation. And we're looking at new applications through the next IFRI program. All this then sort of gives us the ammunition we need to go to FDA and start discussing, and we started discussing with the FDA about what is it we're going to need in the US. So, what have I learnt? We've clearly been successful winning grants. I think when I calculated, we had about 3.75 million of grant funding. That's over 14 years. The first 10 years, we got nothing, other than the first grant. I think the learning point for me was you need to stop, or you can't look at this as academics look at it. Write good science, expect people to understand the good science, and think, this is fantastic, let's fund it. You need the commercial dimension. You need to understand how it's going to be used, what it's going to do, and how it's going to change the way the NHS works. You can't get that by doing science research. You've got to get out there and talk to the clinicians, and talk to the healthcare managers, and talk to anyone who associated with that industry. As I said, when we first went out there, we thought this is great, help you diagnose stroke. No, gets rid of the mimics. We've been successful in one grant, and we've been able to leverage that to get other grants. And that's because we've delivered. I think there is a section in the application form that says, have you had a grant and did you deliver? And I think if you answer, or they suspect the answer is no, you're not going to get another grant out of them. So delivering is important. And I'm actually completely behind Innovate on that. I don't want to see Innovate's money wasted. There are too many good projects out there that need funding, and if people are going to waste the money, well, they can clear off, in my view. In our case, we have to work with partners. We need access to patients. We need access to good research people. Again, I'm not interested in freeloaders who just want their names on papers and things. I want people to deliver and be as committed to delivering. And we've worked very long and hard to find the right partners, and Oxford AHS is one of our partners, the most collaborator with us, Julie Holmes, Oxford, and they've helped us. It's worth investing time and effort in finding those partners and making sure those partners are as committed as you are. I don't apply for grants that are not on that strategic path for me. I haven't got time. I haven't got an R&D, if you've got an R&D team that you need to keep alive just because you don't want to fire them or make them redundant, well, actually, that's not what grants are there for. I don't use grant writers. Apology if any of you are grant writers. If it's so important to the company, I have to do it, or Nick Dale has to do it. We have, if this piece of work, this money is critical for us moving to the next stage, I am not going to leave it to someone who's got 5 other jobs that they're trying to do. It is competitive, but it's not a lottery. If you plan, if you think through what you're trying to do, if you find the right partners, you understand the problem you're trying to solve, both from a scientific, operational, and commercial perspective, you gather the evidence that you can present to the Innovate assessors, and you road test, you've got evidence that what you're proposing has a good chance of working, your grant application is going to be of a reasonably good quality. So that research, that investment is absolutely critical. Julie and I are working on looking for the right partners on our next IVD application, which is 2009. And we know who the team are going to be, roughly. And finally, I'd say it's not about great science. To use, I can't remember which advisor to Bill Clinton was, it's about the economy, stupid. If you look at Innovate's remit, it's about driving up productivity and growing the economy. So if you want to put a scientific grant application in, MRC, welcome, BBRC are the place to go to. Innovate's about taking good science and creating commercial opportunities. Don't know if that helps you or not. I hope I haven't said anything that Innovate would say, we don't like that, we don't, you know, we like to see lots of grant applications. I think you like to see lots of good grant applications. These are my sort of pointers to how to go about putting together a good grant application.
So what I was actually going to do is ask everybody, all the presenters, to come back up for a second. You mentioned KTPs there. Something we haven't actually mentioned so far, knowledge transfer partnerships. This is essentially a way that companies can sort of interact with the academic world. It's a way of getting access to sort of universities' resources, knowledge, by sort of embedding somebody from that world into your company. I don't have the latest knowledge, so please look at our website under KTPs. It's another option for sort of getting some money out of us. I think they're pretty much open all the time. So, well, yeah. Well, you mentioned this.
We had a project officer meeting earlier this week, and she was encouraging us to go for the next one.
I should have mentioned that earlier, but we didn't do. So please look at those as well. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So what I'm going to do, open it up. I've got a few questions of my own, so I'm going to take the privilege to ask those before everybody else. To get some comments first. And then we'll open it up, but I won't take too much time. So my first question is really about the assessor process. And the thing we haven't mentioned, when your project is assessed by 5 independent assessors, we try to look for 3 from ministry and 2 from academia / NHS. So there is a balance there, but we are industry focused, so that's what takes priority. One thing we do get some good feedback on is actually it's always quite good useful advice from the assessors. Now it's probably been a while since you remember the application process, but I was just wondering if there's anything you noticed or anything that you found useful from the actual assessor feedback, because it's something that I think even if you don't win, it's a useful experience, I think.
I completely agree. So you write the grant, you put it in, you've got 10 pretty key questions. If you can't answer those questions, you haven't got a business, or certainly not a business plan. And you've got 5 experts who are paid to evaluate your responses. Now, you don't have to take that advice. You don't have to take anybody's advice. You don't have to take your mother's advice. But at least the industry assessors, I think, have always been, I think I've applied for something like 7 Innovate projects. The industry assessors are always pretty high caliber and pretty friendly, and they've been there and done that. They've done projects that have failed, and they've done projects that were new and risky. So they're quite good. I said earlier, and it might not be the politically Defoe thing to say, but the academic assessors are sometimes a little bit out trying to prove themselves a little bit, but you don't have to take their advice. I think sometimes the fairness comes in a little bit and people defer to the academics. So I know we did one application, for example, where someone's from Newcastle here, they might give me a hard time, but some Newcastle academics basically kiboshed the application. Years later, exactly that application has turned out to be a commercial success. And actually the Newcastle guys have now come around to it. But it's a competition, and life's not completely fair, and no human is completely arbitrary. So I think you just have to accept that you have 5 assessors looking at a variety of different businesses, and you have to put different plans against each other.
I think from Oxford Biodynamics' point of view, I think for us, the basis was on the exploitation plan. So what could you do with your results and how they could be exploited at the end? And that was always put through at all stages for us, that we needed a plan at the end that then could take the results on and take them further. So if you can put your point across when you're putting your application in, that this is where those results are going to go, I think that will then help the assessors then get you up the ladder of this is going to be a successful application.
Yeah, my experience of the assessors' feedback is really a failing on my part, that I've not understood how I'm presenting my idea. And bits of my thought process which either were not well qualified, or alternatively, I've had a very narrow view, and they've come in with a much more insightful way of looking at it. And when I've gone to pitch the company or whatever, those sort of comments help you reframe what your pitch looks like. or has to convey. So if your application has failed, clearly the assessor's pointers are where you need to strengthen it, but also it gives you a much more, an outsider's view of what your business is looking like, as opposed to being blinkered and having a totally internal view of it.
Okay. And one last quick, well, not quick question necessarily. As you may have noticed, I'm quite keen on the idea of sort of value propositions and doing your homework properly and feasibility. And I think some of the things that come up about, you're not selling a box to the NHS, and this isn't an academic exercise. Actually you have to, and you're not just trying to get grants for the sake of it. It's got to fit into a bigger picture. So I think in terms of the idea of value proposition and not doing that, how did that sort of feed into the way you approach things? In terms of this isn't just trying to get money out. It actually fits into a bigger plan, as it were.
So the value. I'll follow on from the end of your proposition. So, I don't think you could have a successful application in this competition without addressing the health economic question. Now, there may not be a specific health economic. It doesn't necessarily say what is the cost utility of your test or device or drug or whatever. But I think you can read that in brackets in at least one of the questions. And so some way of objectively assessing why your technology is of value needs to be done. Now, that's not a new science. That's a pretty established science. And actually, the UK is a bit of a world leader when it comes to health economics, not least because of institutions like NICE. It's like any kind of science. You can disagree with certain methodologies and you can openly debate it and you can say how ICERs are not great or they're brilliant, or QALYs are not great or they're brilliant, and this measure of outcomes is better than that measure of outcomes. But if I was an assessor, I would look to see a company that had looked and said, look, we've got a great technology, we are going to measure the value proposition in the ways necessary for it to be adopted in different markets. Now, those markets may all be in the UK. I probably wouldn't invest in your company then. Or they may all be outside of the UK, in which case, ask yourself the health economic proposal you're going to have to do to get in front of the Centre for Medicaid and Medicare. That might be a completely different health economic study, but if it's going to generate revenues back to the UK and create UK jobs and promote UK technology and UK exports, I'm imagining Innovate UK is all going to be for that. So it doesn't have to be the NHS as your market, but you have to have a utility proposal that is credible, that will allow you to sell to someone. That's the most important thing.
I think for us, it was looking at a niche market. So we were developing for ALS. There is not much out there for ALS at all. I think that for patients, if they are diagnosed with ALS, giving something back that can actually go into a trial, that can actually be hopeful for them as they go through the trial, is useful as well. So I think for us, we were looking for a way to go in with clinical trials where there is no scope really at the moment, and then be able to help with the diagnosis of fast and slow progressors, in this case with ALS. So we were looking to fit that niche market, and I think if your idea has got that niche market and you've got a way of selling that on to Innovate to make sure that they understand your process, I think then you fill that gap, and then Innovate can see that you fit in and you can help with the diagnosis, in this case, of ALS. So I think that's where you can sell yourself. If you've got that niche area, you think, yes, no one else is there, that's the way you should push it forward and try and promote yourself that way.
I can only give the experience we've had about coming up with a value proposition, and the importance of understanding your potential customers' perspective of what they're buying, why they're buying it, and how they will use it, and how they justify buying it to their finance managers. When we first started out, we thought, fantastic, we can diagnose stroke, it's so difficult. And then we just went to the clinicians, they said, you think you can do your job better than I can? Really? And expect me to buy it? Forget it. It took us 2 years to realize, actually, we need to flip this on its head and just say, we're going to get rid of the patients you don't want turning up in your clinic. And at which point they all switched and said, this is fantastic. So that ability to go out there with an open mind and to understand from a customer's perspective what problem you're trying to fix, why it's important that it's fixed for them, and what the value is for them, which is what the value proposition is something you have to do. And I have to say the assessors are very clued up on that sort of thing.
I think I've taken up enough time. Are there any other questions? Yes. The microphone's coming to you if you give a second.
Thank you. So my question is about how you build that value proposition. Generally, in my experience, you kind of scrape information from wherever you can find it. You know, how many patients are affected by this particular disease that you're interested in, trying to estimate how much the costs are, what the business models look like. Am I missing something? Is there some service in the UK or something, connection into the NHS where you can easily find out patient numbers and how much we spend in the UK on certain treatments or diagnosis?
Okay, so let's play this through, right? So you have a drug company, device company?
So I work for Siemens. So
Siemens, okay, right.
Diagnostic.
Right. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're trying to develop something, is your global, pretend it's not Siemens, maybe it's Health and Ears, but a different company. If your global revenue is going to be from the UK, which is 3% of global healthcare spending, you're kind of setting yourself a very limited share. So for me, the value proposition should be in the care pathway for a patient. And it could be a patient with a certain kind of disease that's limited to certain geographies, like ALS.
So what we tend to do is create a target market and then a growth market, right?
Yeah.
So our growth market is always the global market, but when we are trying to identify the target market, I'm trying to understand, is there, and let's say that's in the UK because this is where the funding's coming from, is there some way in the UK to find out really specifics about, say, a particular disease that
Sure.
you guys are using?
So there are many resources in the UK. So for example, any of the big academic institutions that specialise in epidemiology, so the London School of Hygiene just next door, Oxford, York, Edinburgh, academics there really know about the epidemiology of disease in the UK. Biobank is a great resource for epidemiology of disease. Those researchers know a lot about the conditions they're studying, which tend to be more mainstream conditions, so cardiovascular, neurological, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to know about the disease prevalence and change patterns, that's pretty easy to access in the UK, and because it's a fairly collected record system, that's pretty easy. If you want to do that in the US, the Kaiser system's very available. But in some territories, which are actually some of the fastest growing markets, you just have to do some legwork. So I've got two guys literally walking around parts of Beijing where there are 260 hospitals, almost as many as in the whole of the UK, just in Beijing, central Beijing, looking at what the liver pathway is for a patient going into hospital. Now that data is hard to collect, so that's legwork. But that's kind of what the feasibility aspect of this grant covers. So I couldn't wait for this opening because the China market is that quick. But if I wanted to invest in or get support to explore the China market, that would be an application I could have put in, I think, to the feasibility thing with exactly that kind of statement. I know what the prevalence of liver disease is in the UK and how I'm going to grow my market here. I'm interested in going to territory X, but I would like Innovate UK to review my application to look at the market research to do so. But I think the UK is really good in terms of centralizing data, and there's a place called the Fire Institute just down the road. Again, the academics there could answer all your questions. There's a guy there called Harry Hemingway, perfect guy to answer these.
I'll add a little bit as well. So there are a lot of organisations. Before James does his pitch for the catapult, so there are obviously the academic health science networks, which you've got Julie from the Oxford one here. We have what were the diagnostic evidence cooperatives, but now are the medtech in vitro diagnostic cooperatives, MIX, and there are several of those around the country. Also, the KTM produced a thing called the Precision Medicine Landscape. It's a website that you can get to via the KTN website, I guess. So we've got a whole link of organisations out there And I guess there are things like the NICE meta tool. There are more organisations you can throw a stick at for this sort of stuff. So again, if there are any issues, mixed HSNs, I don't know if you've been to those sort of things before, but there are a lot of organisations out there. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox. We're not necessarily using them as well as we should do. I think that's the issue. Mainly because people don't necessarily know they exist, possibly. Anything else?
I think this is part of the process. You're going to be working with collaborators here, and we were working with Oxford University, who then helped us with the clinician side of the ALS and the diagnosis side of that. So we worked with another partner, Kronos, who then gave us that information as well. So when you come together, you get all of your expertise together, and I think that's what's great about the Innovate grant, is it brings those collaborators together.
I'll just reinforce Banjo's comment. It's legwork. If you want the real data, it doesn't matter what's on databases. You've got to put the legwork in.
Shall we end with James doing a pitch for the catapult, shall we?
Not at all. I was just going to say, you've said exactly what I wanted to say in response to your question, so really nothing more to say. One question I did have, which was collaboration. A lot of these bids are collaborative R&D, and collaboration is hard. It basically makes your problems more difficult to solve. It makes them easier to solve in some ways. So it'd be great to hear the view of the panel on how to make a good collaborative bid and how to make a good collaborative project work.
The way I've done it is by finding partners, investing time in getting to know the partner, and really being comfortable with that, the collaborative partner. It takes time.
Communication. I mean, we got together, we had meetings. I got to know the collaborators very well, and I still talk to them now. So I think it's important that you have that faux pas with them and you can talk to them. If you can't talk to them, you're going to struggle. So get that communication going right from the start and keep it going all the way to the end.
So I have the benefit of being a doctor, so I want to collaborate with doctors that I would trust to treat me. So that's the bar I set. That rules out a lot of people. The most important, this is the same as when looking at hires. A collaborator is effectively just as important a pick as a new board member or a senior appointment in your company. They are going to have a huge impact on your company progress. So you make the wrong collaboration agreement and it's going to cost you, and it's just like a board appointee, it's pretty hard to change. So don't think willy-nilly about this. If the 6-week, 8-week timeline's too short to establish whether you have a good rapport with someone, wait till the next one. It's worth it. When you're looking for a collaborator, there are many things to consider. You might want to go for a big established expert. That's great, big name. They've probably got 15 people clamoring after them, and they've probably established a name based on alternate technologies, and yours is not in their stable. If yours becomes in their stable, like Purine's and Gary Ford, brilliant. Another way of going at it is look for someone who's young and hungry. So there are specific places, I'll share with you one avenue. The US military trains a lot of research-oriented physicians because when they're not in the field and they're back at home, they have protected research time. It's how they attract good physicians into the US military. Now, those US military physicians are looking for projects to develop because they have time, but they don't have the research infrastructures of the Mayos and the UCSFs and the MGHs. So if you want to take the bet and you think in the long run that the veteran affairs market or the Medicaid market, which listens to the VA, is something you want to go into, why not get a collaborator from the US military? That's a tactical decision that you have to make early on. In the UK, do you want to go for the big professor or his hungriest postdoc who's looking to differentiate himself or herself? These are the kind of questions you should ask, rather than just, who's the current biggest name in condition X in Oxford, Cambridge, etc.
Excellent. Okay, I think we'll draw it to a close there. We're within a couple of minutes. That's pretty good going. Before I make some final marks, we just thank our presenters again, if that's okay. Thank you. So we've got lunch for about an hour now. What we were going to do to try and help facilitate some networking is we're going to assign, for the 4 challenges collaborative R&D, we're going to assign a table so people can get together and discuss similar things if they want to. Now that depends on how many people stay and what we have in the room. But certainly that's what we're going to make available after about 2 o'clock. We'll just assign a table for each of those 4 areas.